Thanks everybody for joining in today's webinar. What we're going to discuss is what we should be preparing for now. I've been getting a lot of questions about weight gain or the breeding season upcoming, and it's really timely that people are asking about those, because that is exactly what we should be preparing for now. We have about 2 months before we get to the breeding season, and really only about 30 days out here on the East Coast before it gets really cold. But for some of you in other areas, it's already cold. So if we're looking at putting on some weight as our horses go into the wintertime, because we know they lose a little bit of weight, we'll discuss that. And then also the breeding season really is just right around the corner, and so we need to be prepared for that. This isn't something that we can just say, oh, I want to breed a mare tomorrow, what should I be feeding my stallion? We need to be proactive so that we get the best performance possible out of our animals. So the first product that I believe we should be discussing when it comes to weight gain is oil, as far as a DAC product. Now, obviously, for weight gain, you're going to feed more hay, you're going to improve the quality of your hay, you're going to add DDA. These are all just given, they're the basics. You're going to do all of those. But then as far as an additional supplement that's going to give you pure calories, we're going to look at oil. Oil is 99% fat. It is very calorie dense. One of the big differences, because I always get asked what is the difference between DAC oil and other oils, one of the big differences is DAC oil has 4,000 IUs of natural vitamin E. If we go back, you can see here in the guaranteed analysis, if we go across, 4,000 IUs of natural vitamin E per pound. Now, most people aren't going to be feeding a pound, but per ounce, which is 1 pump, that's 250 IUs. So you can calculate if you're doing 6 pumps a day, 7 pumps, 4 pumps, you can work out exactly how much vitamin E your horse is getting. It's a blend of vegetable oils as well as that natural vitamin E. Excuse me. So if we look at some other oils on the market, you can see they either do not have any natural vitamin E, don't have significant amounts of vitamin E. The other thing is the marine-based omega-3 fatty acids. So the DAC oil has a small amount of fish oil in it, which really boosts the omega-3 fatty acids. We've talked about omega-3 fatty acids before and how they're broken down into 3 categories. Your ALA, which is coming from flax and chia and hemp and your kind of plant forms, and then your DHA and EPA, which come from your marine-based sources, and they are the actual omega-3 fatty acids that get utilized by the horse, not the ALA. So you can see none of these products have marine-based omega-3s, which the DAC oil does, and also none of these have the concentration of vitamin E that the DAC oil does. Other than that, every single oil, whether it's one of these oils on the screen or the DAC oil, has exactly the same calorie content. Palatability is different between oils, and then obviously the vitamin E and omega-3 fatty acid content. Now, I just want to highlight a little bit more about that vitamin E, because people often ask, well, if I'm feeding DAC oil, is that going to give my horse enough vitamin E? And if I've just broken it down here to show you exactly how much vitamin E you're getting based on pumps. Now, 16 pumps, that's about a pound. That's 16 ounces. That's a pound. You see in 1 pump, you're getting that 250 IUs. Now, when I say IUs, I'm referring to international units. That is how we measure vitamin E, just like we measure body weight in pounds or different nutrients in milligrams or ounces. We measure vitamin E and other vitamins with international units. Now then, the Nutrient Requirements Council has set a requirement that every horse at maintenance needs at least 500 IUs of vitamin E per day. And you can see in just 2 pumps of DAC oil, you're going to get that. If we look at something like the Elevate powder, which is just vitamin E, it's a natural vitamin E source that you can purchase. Their 1 to 2 scoops per day will give you 1 to 2,000 IUs of natural vitamin E per day. That's their maintenance rate. You can see that you're getting that. If you're feeding 4 ounces, 4 pumps of oil, you're getting 1,000 IUs. If you're feeding 8 ounces of oil, you're getting 2,000 IUs of natural vitamin E. So you're getting your maintenance dose right there. 12 pumps of oil, that's 12 ounces, you're going to get about that 3,000 IUs, which is what we want to see when we're looking at pregnancy, lactation, intense exercise, stallions. And then if we have some kind of added deficiency, 16 pumps a day is going to give you that 4,000 IUs. There really is not another oil product out there that's going to give you that much vitamin E. So this is really, really a huge selling point for the DAC oil. So let's just quickly go over what it takes to put weight on a horse. How much do I have to feed? How long do I have to feed it for, and how quickly am I going to get that weight gain? So let's talk about 1,100-pound horse. That's the typical size of most of our, average performance horses or buggy horses. And to gain a body condition score, that horse is going to have to gain about 40 to 45 pounds. So let's go with 40 pounds because it's easy for me to do the math on. I can safely put that amount of weight on a horse in 60 days, so 2 months. Based on the amount of extra calories we need above maintenance per pound of gain, and we're saying we need 40 pounds of gain, I can safely do that in 60 days. Now, of course, you can do it quicker, but the quicker you have to add weight, the more risk you run for gastric upset because you're feeding them a lot more. And of course, you can go slower than that, but I don't know that anybody wants to do anything slow. So if we take this chart here and just look at the typical ingredients that people use to put weight on their horse: oats, rice bran, beet pulp, alfalfa hay, or oil. And we look at the calorie content in the middle column here, and you can see oats runs about 1.5 megacalories per pound. But look at oil, it's 4.6 megacalories per pound. It is nearly four times the calorie density of something like oats. So let's just say right now we're feeding 5 pounds of sweet feed and we're feeding 15 pounds of hay. So he's not gaining any weight, he's not losing any weight. I want him to gain weight. If I keep my base diet exactly where it is, where he's just maintaining, he's not gaining, and I choose oats as my calorie source, for that 60 days, I would have to feed 4.5 pounds, close to 4.5 pounds of oats per day on top of what I'm already feeding to get me that weight gain. That's just purely based on the amount of calories in each pound of oats. Rice bran has a similar calorie content to oats. Now, oats, it's going to be primarily coming from starch. Rice bran, it's coming a little bit more from fat, but still, if we just look at the calories, the calorie content is very similar. Beet pulp is another ingredient that a lot of people use for weight gain because it's a super fiber. It's a highly digestible fiber source. However, based on the amount of calories per pound, you can see that slightly less than rice bran and oats. You would have to feed about 5 pounds of beet pulp per day on top of what you're already feeding. Now, that is dry beet pulp, so you're going to wet that beet pulp, and we typically recommend a 2-to-1, sometimes even 3-to-1 ratio of water to dry beet pulp. So that could be anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds of wet beet pulp. So that is just going to be a little much bulk to feed the horse. Alfalfa hay, 1.1 megacalories per pound. So you can see it's a little less than the above ingredients as far as calorie content. So we'd have to feed about 6 pounds of alfalfa per day. That's a little easier to stomach than the wet beet pulp because there are other things that you're going to get out of the alfalfa as well. In a long stem hay, they're going to stand there, they're going to chew, produce saliva, they're getting calcium for stomach ulcers, they're getting protein that's going to help with body condition. So alfalfa hay is a little easier to throw out 6 pounds, an additional 6 pounds per day, and they can just chew on that throughout the day. There's a lot less management involved with throwing out 6 pounds of alfalfa than 5 pounds of beet pulp. Now the oil though, oil is always my go-to, and the reason is that most horses that are thin, they don't have a great appetite. Now, there are a lot of horses that do have a great appetite, and we just need to feed them more. But a lot of times with a thin horse, they just don't have a great appetite. And so we need to boost that. And we can't just be adding a lot of bulk because they're not eating that very well. So the oil is just so calorie dense. So a little over 2 cups works out to be just under 1.5 pounds. And so that will give you that same weight gain that you would get from 4.5 pounds of oats, 4.5 pounds of rice bran, etc. So it's just so calorie dense. Most horses won't even know when you put the oil on. At that quantity of oil, I'd really like to see you split it up over 2 to 3 meals so that we can increase feed efficiency and we don't kind of cause any diarrhea. But oil is always my go-to. So I've also broken down here. There's oftentimes a question between oil and bloom. Bloom it does have extra calories in it, but compared to oil, it's just not as calorie dense. I look at bloom when I am trying to just get a little better hair coat, for example, if I have a poor hair coat, and also it's better protein quality. But for purposes of I have a short amount of time and I need to put some significant weight on a horse, oil over bloom every day. If you're preparing a horse for a sale, let's say we use the bloom on our weanlings over the winter time and we want to sell them in spring sales, then I would start using the bloom in the last 60 days of prep prior to the sale, because then I'm literally just giving the horse that extra bloom that it needs, but it's not one that I'm going to use for significant weight gain. Again, I broke it down versus 1 pump versus 16 pumps. So 1 ounce versus 16 ounces or a pound, how much natural vitamin E you're getting out of it, how many calories you're getting out of 1 pump versus how many calories you're getting out of the same 1 ounce of bloom. And you can see, okay, if we take 1 pound of alfalfa, 1 pound of alfalfa is the same calorie content as 3.5 pumps of oil. Now, like I said, you are getting other benefits out of alfalfa, chewing, etc. But if we just look at the calorie content, 1 pound of alfalfa is equivalent calories-wise to 3.5 ounces or 3.5 pumps of oil. 1 pound of beet pulp, dry beet pulp, is equivalent to 4.5 pumps of oil as far as calories. 1 pound of oats or rice bran, and I've got these backwards here. So I've actually got these backwards. Alfalfa should be down here because alfalfa is less calorie dense. And then here, this one's correct. 1 pound of bloom equals 7.5 pumps of oil. So if we break it down and we're doing a comparison with other oils on the market, all of them have the exact same fat content, 98% fat. Then I've broken it down based on the ALA, those one type of omega-3s, the DHA and the EPA, also omega-6 fatty acids, which are inflammatory fatty acids, versus natural and synthetic vitamin E. Do they contain natural or synthetic vitamin E? And lastly, are they recognized by NASC? Do they carry the NASC seal, that National Animal Supplement Council seal? So the DAC oil, 98% fat, 7.2% of those ALAs, 1.2% DHA, 2.6 EPA. The total omega-3s here is 7, 8, 9, 10. 11% omega-3s if we add all these up, and 18.2% of these omega-6s. Now, if you look at coca soya oil, for example, that's another one that people are drawn to. It has very little omega-3s, only 7.5, but what I don't like is this 49% omega-6 fatty acids, and that's primarily from the high quantity of soybean oil. And those omega-6 fatty acids, if we have a horse that's suffering from any kind of inflammation, metabolic syndrome, then we want to keep those inflammatory markers down. Equine omega complete, same thing. It's got nearly 54% of those omega-3 fatty acids. The healthy oil, 51. They're actually this health E oil and then healthy E oil, both have 50 and 51% respectively. And then you can go down and just look at the pure oils: canola, flaxseed, sunflower, coconut, soybean oil, etc. And you can see that the omega-6 fatty acid content here is pretty high and very, very low omega-3s. And none of these plant-based oils have any of those marine-based DHA or EPA, which is the actual omega-3 that gets used by the horse. But also the natural vitamin E and the NASC logo. We really want to be using products that carry that NASC logo. This is just purely looking at the DHA. Now, when we designed the DAC oil, we never actually created it to be an omega-3 fatty acid supplement. We put some fish oil in to boost the omega-3s, but that's not its primary role. Even though that's not its primary role, it's still better than most of its competitors when it comes to DHA that present themselves, that market themselves as omega-3 fatty acid supplements. So your Smart Omega and your Equine Omega Complete, they promote themselves as omega-3 enhanced oils, but the actual omega-3 that the horse uses is really low in those. And we'll talk about the DHA Perform and the Breeders Excel when we talk about breeding stallions. So, stallion health, Breeders Excel. This is the time that we need to get on board with stallion health if we want our stallions to start the breeding season in January or February, because we have about 60 days where we need a solid 60 days to improve the health, body condition, and seminal quality of these horses. It takes a full 60 days to get that going so that we can see those outcomes when it comes to semen health. So let's talk about a natural stallion. I always like to go back to what's normal for horses, and then we can kind of understand what we need to do to correct some of the pitfalls that we've created. So wild stallions run with a group of mares ranging, long distances, searching for food, and he's usually the fittest horse in the herd. Domesticated stallions, however, are typically confined, isolated from a herd. Very few of our domestic stallions are actually running in a herd of mares. So they develop behavioral issues that can cause stress. We know that stress decreases reproductive hormones. So we want to do everything we can to keep that stallion healthy, fit, and decrease his stress. So breeding stallions on average have daily nutrient requirements that are about 25% above the maintenance. So during the off season, we can look at a stallion, they pretty much just have maintenance requirements. Maybe they're doing light or moderate exercise. Whatever their off season requirements were, increase that by a quarter. 25% more than that is what they need during the breeding season. It's a similar output to those horses doing light or moderate exercise. When we start the breeding season, I want stallions to be in a body condition score of at least a 6 or a 7. I'm going to go more towards a 7, which I would typically say is overweight for stallions that I know are going to lose a lot of weight through the breeding season, because I don't want to get to the end of the breeding season and have that stallion at a 4. So if you know that you have a stallion that stresses a lot through the breeding season, doesn't eat great, typically loses quite a bit of weight, then we want to get him a little heavier going into the breeding season, knowing that he's going to lose it. They need to get roughage that contains, or hay that contains, at least 10% or more crude protein. Balance that out with a good diet and a good vitamin mineral supplement. So a lot of our local grass hays, this year at least, over the last 5 years have been averaging between 5 and 7%. So if you have access to just a local grass hay, you really should be adding in some alfalfa to your stallion program. It's going to boost the protein quality. It's going to boost the calorie content. And also boost the calcium content if he stresses and suffers from some gastric ulcers. That can also be beneficial. They'll eat about 10% more feed, but has 20% increase in requirements for, say, energy, lysine, calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. Now, why calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium? These are really important for muscle development and exercise and stamina. You know, they're doing a lot of exercise, so you really need them to recover, especially if you're breeding more than one mare a day. Vitamin A and vitamin E requirements increase by over 50%, and that's because they're really important antioxidants and also important for semen quality and health. If you have a stallion that's typically difficult to handle, he needs exercise, but also decrease the sugars and starches in his diet because they can be affecting his behavior. So during the non-breeding season, though, what are we doing with our stallions? Well, people are coming to inspect them. We're doing a lot of photography because we're marketing them. A lot of stallions are competing, going in the show ring, so they still need to look great during the non-breeding season. During the breeding season, though, we need all those calories and energy because if we're underfeeding them, they're going to tire quickly and they're not going to have great libido, so you really won't be able to breed many stallions. So we need to make sure that we're not underfeeding stallions. The horse in the photograph there, I would consider underfed for a stallion. I could see some stallions coming out of the breeding season looking a little like that, but I certainly do not want stallions going into the breeding season looking like that. Obesity, though, the other end of the spectrum, is the #1 enemy when it comes to a stallion's libido and fertility. You do not want a fat stallion. You don't want them thin, but you don't want them fat either. It's going to decrease performance. It's going to put more pressure on his joints, and there will be a lot of pain. Obesity is associated with inflammation, which decreases semen quality as well. So we'll decrease libido, we'll suffer, maybe increase our risk for laminitis. And this would be not necessarily a feed-related laminitis, but also a physical, mechanical laminitis. You know, if he's mounting the mare, he's putting all of his weight on those hind feet, and so that's putting a lot of pressure. Also colic, when you've seen my diagrams of the digestive system and how it sits in the horse. If they're overweight, then there's a lot of extra fat sitting around in there, and it can get in the way of those organs. So we really don't want these horses fat. That can increase their risk for colic as well. Now, this is a diagram that actually comes from human nutrition. I hope that our horses aren't eating ice cream and French fries and whatever else is depicted there in the unhealthy diet. But we can take this. Obesity does the same things in any mammal. It increases fat deposition, so these adipocytes, or fat cells really, increase. That increases oxidative stress, which is inflammation. And when we've talked about vitamin E, we've talked a lot about oxidative stress. It increases this hormone called leptin. It increases these toxins that come from fat, increases cholesterol. And you can see if you follow these lines all the way over to spermatogenesis, which is in the stallion, is absolutely critical. They all have a negative effect on spermatogenesis. This inflammation, this increased oxidative stress, increases sperm damage as well. The actual genetic material in sperm is decreased and damaged when we have this increased oxidative stress, so this increased obesity. Also, it is feeding back on these reproductive hormones. So if you go up and we look at leptin and we go across to this GnRH, these are hormones that are going to regulate libido and then further down the track also affect spermatogenesis. So all around, at no point there is there an increase in anything good when it comes to being obese. So we don't want our horses obese. So what are some other reproductive disorders and how are they associated to nutrition? So not enough green forage is going to decrease our vitamin A and vitamin E, which are powerful antioxidants. Now, we've also talked about the fact that when we cut hay, it decreases immediately in vitamin E. So our vitamin E supplement is really critical for stallions, especially stallions that are going to breed early in the season that do not have access to green pasture because we're coming out of winter. Selenium is really critical for motility and fertility of that semen. Manganese, libido, sperm function, quantity of sperm, quality. Zinc also is important for semen creation and sperm count, and calcium is really critical in motility of that sperm. Doesn't matter if you have a great little sperm if it has terrible motility, so terrible tail quality, for example. So when it comes to semen quality, oxidative damage, that oxidative stress that we've talked about can decrease fertility and the ability to store semen and the sperm lifespan. Well, we want to increase all of those things. Omega-3 fatty acid supplements containing DHA, such as the Breeders' Excel, research has shown positive effects on reproductive success because of these antioxidant properties. This is some more research. So, and actual just facts about the sperm. DHA, which is deoxyhexanoic acid, but we can just use DHA for short. It's been shown to significantly increase the number of sperm per ejaculate, increase the motility of sperm, decrease dead and abnormal sperm compared to non-supplemented stallions, increases the number of motile sperm when you're cooling or freezing semen. Has been shown after the dietary intake of omega-3 fatty acids to improve motility, longevity, morphology, as well as total sperm count. And work done at Texas A&M showed that stallions supplemented with omega-3 fatty acids showed a 3-fold increase, 3 times increase in semen levels when supplemented with DHA compared to those not supplemented with DHA. Inadequate DHA concentration is one of the main causes of low-quality spermatozoa. So it's really important that we're adding this to the diet. We've seen this before, but I figured I'd show it again. That ALA that I talked about earlier that comes from your flax and chia and hemp, your plant form of omega-3 fatty acid, it needs to be converted to DHA and EPA in order to have any effect in the body. It's the DHA that the semen is using and is being used for semen health. And that conversion in the horse is really poor. So we want to bypass feeding flax, chia, those plant forms to get significant amounts of DHA and just go right to these marine-based sources. And that's what we've done. We've gone to an algae-based DHA, and that's how we're increasing the DHA content in the Breeders' Excel. The big thing you can see here, Breeders' Excel active ingredients, vitamin E, because it's a powerful antioxidant, 1,000 IUs, the DHA, really concentrated amounts of DHA. It's a pound a day feeding rate for stallions. Pregnant mares, I should say, the barren mares that we're going to start feeding now, about 8 ounces per day, so half a pound per day, and also pregnant mares because the DHA can really improve brain eye function in that foal. It's really important for foal health as well. But a pound a day for a stallion, half a pound a day for a brood mare. But you must start feeding it 60 days prior to the breeding season. So we've just started November. So we've got November, December. And if you plan on breeding in January, then you need to get your stallions on this now. The other thing is these stallions must be on a good vitamin and mineral supplement. The Breeders' Excel does not give you vitamins and minerals other than vitamin E. The Breeders' Choice Plus is going to give you a broad spectrum vitamin E supplement, vitamin and mineral supplement, as will the Orange Superior. Now, the Breeders' Excel, Breeders' Choice Plus, we typically recommend that for brood mares that are having problems because it has increased levels of vitamin A. I want to keep it simple. If you've got a brood mare operation and you keep Breeders' Choice on hand and that's what you want to feed everything, then go ahead and feed that to your stallion. It's going to be great for your stallion. If you feed a lot of your horses Orange Superior and you don't want to buy a specific supplement for your stallion, then absolutely feed them either Orange Superior or the Breeder's Choice Plus. That is going to be a great all-around vitamin and mineral supplement for your stallions. Everything I've mentioned here is 100% safe for broodmares, foals, stallions. There's nothing in any of these products that I wouldn't feed to any class of horse. So with that being said, I've also been asked recently quite a few times about different grains that people are feeding to horses. I was recently asked about Milo or sorghum and could you feed it to horses? So I figured I'd just close this out with some characteristics of different grains that are available to feed to horses, and then a bit about starch in each of these, and then digestibility of each of these, because it doesn't matter how great they look on paper, if they're not digestible to the horse, then it's a bit of a waste. So oats, probably the most common grain fed to horses, has a soft kernel, it's easy to chew. Processing oats is not beneficial except for horses with poor teeth or those that are very young. So you really don't have to roll, crimp, do anything with oats. As I've mentioned, the digestibility difference between whole oats and these other processed oats is only about 3%, so that's not very much. The most easily digestible of all the grains because of the starch molecule. So we look at the starch in these grains, and we're really looking at how tightly packed those starch molecules are. And oat starch is not that tightly packed. Some people use the term crystalline. If you think about crystals, they're really tightly packed. But the starch molecule in oats is not that tightly packed. So it's all starch is meant to be broken down by amylase in the small intestine, but some of these really tightly packed starch molecules that we'll see in other grains, they're just not able to be broken down. Horses in the wild just wouldn't typically eat those types of starch molecules, so we have to break them down so that horse can have access to them. That's why we consider oats one of the safest grains to feed to horses, because the starch particles are really easy to break down, and so they can be broken down in the small intestine and not flow through to the hindgut and cause issues. We look at barley grain. Barley looks similar to oat grains, but it's harder. Therefore, we typically recommend crimping it, rolling it, steam flaking it. It has a moderate fiber content. It's got less energy than corn, but more energy than oats. It's less palatable than oats or corn and is more typically seen mixed into a grain mix or commercial mix after it's been processed. Not a lot of people are going to feed straight barley. Corn, slightly less palatable than oats, but more palatable than other grains. Unfortunately, it's prone to mold. The corn is lower in fiber, but higher in energy and density than oats. So if we take a 2-quart scoop and we fill it with oats versus filling it with corn, it's going to weigh more because corn is more dense than oats. So just by feeding by volume, you're going to have more weight of corn. Provides twice as much energy as equal volume of oats, but unfortunately, barley and corn, their starch molecules are really tightly packed and really hard to digest in the small intestine. It must be processed. So another one that I've been getting questions about is Milo or sorghum. That you can see the picture's a little grainy, but you can see it's a really small, little hard grain. It's a hard, small kernel similar to wheat, but it must be steam flaked for efficient utilization by the horse. The effect of, it's variable, the nutritive value based on the tannin content. So tannins is kind of what makes tea brown. But the brown type Milo grains are higher in the tannin content than the yellow or red Milo grains, and the tannin content decreased palatability and as well as protein digestibility, because Milo actually has a pretty high protein content compared to other grains. Wheat, the kernel is really small and hard. It needs to be cracked or coarsely ground. Steam flaked is another way for efficient utilization by the horse. Fine grinding, though, should be avoided. Causes too much dust. Another one is rye. Now, it's not commonly grown as a feed grain, but some people do. It's typically used as a pasture or hay. The kernels of rye are really small and hard, similar to those of wheat or milo. And therefore, if the horse is going to utilize it, it really has to be processed, cracked is one of the most common ways of utilizing rye. It has a similar energy and fiber content and feeding value to corn, but it's, again, a little higher in protein content than corn. Like corn, though, it really needs to be closely inspected, not for mold, but an ergot that can be highly toxic to horses. It's not that palatable, so again, we really don't see this fed to horses that much. So if I now move to starch content. So milo and corn, really, out of all of these grains, have the highest starch content, followed by wheat, rye, barley, and oats. Starch content really can also be associated with energy content. So milo and corn and wheat are going to have the most energy out of all of these grains. However, digestibility is opposite. Cereal grains in order of ease of starch digestion. So it doesn't matter if there's all the starch in the world. If the horse can't break it down, then it's pointless. It's going to cause more problems than good. So oats, most digestible, followed by barley, wheat, milo, and corn. Milo and corn are the least digestible, which means you absolutely have to process them. Feeding whole corn to your horse is just a waste of money. Because it's the least digestible, and those starch molecules are not getting broken down. Sure, you're not seeing whole kernels of corn in the horse's manure, but that's not giving you an insight into starch digestion. People will say, well, I see oat holes I see oats in the horse's manure. Okay. Most times, it's actually just the oat hull, because it's a very fibrous, non-digestible oat hull, the fibrous coating. And so that's 9 times out of 10 what you're going to see in the manure. If the manure actually starts to grow, you know that it was the whole oat that came out, was excreted by the horse. And what that tells me is you were feeding too much in a single meal, because even though it's digestible, you still can't be feeding 5-6 pounds of oats in a single meal. The horse just cannot physically digest, no matter how great they are at digesting. They just can't process that much grain. So when you see a lot of oats and they are actual whole oats coming out in the manure, it means you need to feed smaller meals more frequently and less large meals. So with that, I've kind of given you a bit of an overview of what we should be doing now if we have horses that struggle with weight gain throughout the winter months. I know it's not quite winter yet, but we don't want to wait till it's cold before we actually start doing these things, as well as breeding season. For mares and stallions, you need to start thinking about the breeding season now, even though it seems so far off. So now is the perfect time to start.